It started with a knock at the door, and not the friendly kind. I had just moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, hoping for a fresh start and some peace. Instead, I got a woman I now refer to as the HOA Karen. From the very beginning, she had an issue with me. She didn't like where I parked, how I trimmed my shrubs, and apparently she really didn't like that I existed near her son. That's when things took a turn. One afternoon, completely out of nowhere, she called 911 and told the police I needed to be evicted because, get this, her son needs the space to heal. I stood there stunned, trying to figure out how me living in my legally rented home was somehow hurting her adult son's emotional recovery. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was calm, almost rehearsed, as she spoke to the dispatcher. Meanwhile, I was just trying to process why my neighbor was acting like my presence was a personal attack. The cops showed up, and what happened next wasn't just ridiculous, it was borderline unbelievable. I didn't want to believe someone could twist things so dramatically, but then again, this asterisk was the same woman who once complained that my wind chimes were too emotionally disruptive. What happened next? Let's just say it didn't end there. At first, I thought maybe I was just overreacting. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But as the days went on, things got weirder and more unsettling. Karen, the HOA president, seemed to show up everywhere. Every time I went to check my mailbox, there she was, watching from her front porch like some sort of neighborhood surveillance. The whole situation felt like a bad dream I couldn't escape. It wasn't just the calls to 911, though. It was her passive-aggressive comments. "It must be nice to have all that extra space," she'd say while walking by, always with that fake smile that never quite reached her eyes. I tried talking to her once, hoping to clear the air. I thought, maybe if we could have a normal conversation, she'd realize she was overstepping. But no, she kept insisting that her son needed peace and quiet to recover from personal struggles. She barely even looked at me when she spoke, just stared straight ahead like I was some kind of obstacle. The more I tried to be cordial, the more she dug in her heels, and that's when I realized she wasn't going to back down. Then one evening, things took another turn. I got a letter in the mail, and this time it wasn't just another HOA fine. It was a legal notice. Apparently, someone in the neighborhood had filed a formal complaint against me, but who? The letter was from a lawyer, and it wasn't just a simple warning, it was a demand. The document claimed that I was violating neighborhood rules by disturbing the peace with my inappropriate behavior. At first, I was completely confused. I hadn't even hosted a party, let alone done anything that could cause a disturbance. I double-checked my lease and the HOA rules. Everything was above board. That's when it hit me. This was Karen's doing. She had taken her complaints to the next level, and now she was using the HOA as a weapon. I tried reaching out to some of my other neighbors, hoping to get a sense of what was really going on. Most of them seemed friendly enough, but when I brought up Karen or the HOA's complaints, they either got awkward or quickly changed the subject. It was clear that she had a strange kind of influence in the neighborhood. People weren't saying much, but tension was palpable. I had the feeling that she wasn't just some overly involved homeowner. She was someone with a mission, someone who would do whatever it took to get her way. It wasn't long before I started noticing other strange things. My trash cans would be moved around. My driveway, once clear, would suddenly have objects placed in front of it. It wasn't enough to make a huge scene, but it was enough to unsettle me. Karen's grip on the neighborhood felt like it was tightening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was always watching. And then one evening, I saw her, standing across the street, staring at my house. This time, she wasn't smiling. She was glaring. The next few days felt like they were moving in slow motion, each moment more tense than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something big. Karen's behavior was becoming more erratic. One morning, I woke up to find an anonymous note taped to my front door with just a single line scribbled on it: "You're in the way." It was unsettling, But what freaked me out more was the fact that the note had no return address or signature. It was clear someone was trying to intimidate me, but who? Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched. Even when I went for a walk around the block, I noticed Karen's car parked a little too close to my house, always with her in it, eyes trained on me. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard not to feel like I was living under constant surveillance. It was like I was caught in a web, and the more I tried to move, the more tangled I became. Then the final straw came. One afternoon, I came home to find that someone had slashed my tires. I had no proof, but I didn't have to guess who was behind it. My heart was racing as I stared at the damage. It was one thing for Karen to play petty games, but this felt like a dangerous escalation. I had no idea how far she was willing to go to get me out of the neighborhood. That night, as I sat in my living room, a thought started to form in the back of my mind. Maybe this wasn't just about me anymore. Maybe Karen was going after anyone she saw as a threat to her control. And that meant things were only about to get worse. The tire incident wasn't just a random act of vandalism. As the night went on, a chilling realization began to creep in. Karen wasn't acting alone. The more I thought about it, the more I began to notice strange things. People lurking around the neighborhood, odd faces at the HOA meetings, whisperers in the grocery store. It was like Karen had built a small army of supporters, all working together to make my life miserable. I started asking around, trying to find out if anyone knew what was going on. Most of my neighbors clammed up or offered weak excuses, but one woman, Mrs. Carter, the elderly lady a few houses down, gave me a knowing look. She leaned in, lowered her voice, and said something that made my blood run cold. "Be careful, dear. Karen's got more than just the HOA in her pocket. She's been using those meetings to push her own agenda for years." I tried to keep my composure, but the implications of her words hit me hard. I had assumed it was all just personal vendetta, but now I realized there might be something much deeper going on. Karen wasn't just some overbearing neighbor. She was a part of something larger, something that tied into the very foundation of the neighborhood's power structure. Maybe she wasn't after me simply because I was a nuisance. Maybe I was caught in the middle of something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. The next day, a man showed up at my door. He was wearing a suit, but something about his presence felt off. He introduced himself as a legal consultant hired by the HOA, and suddenly, everything made sense. This wasn't just about parking spaces or noise complaints. This was about control, Karen's control. She was pulling strings, using the HOA and her so-called legal consultants to try and run me out. But who else was involved in this scheme? And how far would they go to see it through? I wasn't going to back down, not after everything that had happened. The more I learned, the more I realized how deep Karen's control went. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, determined to confront her directly, armed with the evidence I'd gathered, photos of the vandalized car, the legal documents, and all the strange behavior I'd witnessed. It was time to expose her. The meeting room was packed with neighbors, all nervously looking around, clearly aware of the tension. Karen sat in the front, smug as ever. When I stood up to speak, she gave me a look that could freeze water. But I wasn't intimidated. I laid out everything I knew, every little detail that painted a picture of just how far she'd gone to make my life hell. The room fell dead silent as I spoke. For a moment, it seemed like I was winning. But then Karen stood up. With a wicked smile, she revealed something that left me speechless. "You think I've been pulling the strings, don't you?" she said, her voice calm and almost triumphant. But it wasn't me who had the power all along. Before I could even process what she meant, Karen reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. She slammed it onto the table, and the contents spilled out: detailed records, emails, and official documents, everything pointing to the real power behind the HOA. The bombshell hit hard. The real mastermind wasn't Karen at all. It was the HOA's board president, someone no one had suspected. My next-door neighbor, Mr. Thompson, a quiet man who seemed harmless. He'd been pulling the strings the entire time, using Karen as a puppet. As if that wasn't enough of a shock, Karen turned to me with a look of cold satisfaction. "You think I wanted this fight?" "No, but you were always the wild card. And now you've exposed everything. You'll regret this." The room was in chaos as people started whispering. Mr. Thompson's betrayal shattered the illusion of safety that had held this neighborhood together. But as everyone erupted in disbelief, Karen turned and walked out, her mission seemingly accomplished. She hadn't been trying to get rid of me, she was trying to expose something bigger, something no one was ready for. And as I stood there in the center of it all, I realized that the fight was far from over. The real battle had only just begun. In the days that followed, the fallout from the HOA meeting was like a storm that couldn't be contained. Mr. Thompson's involvement became public knowledge, and the neighborhood was shaken. People who had stayed quiet for so long suddenly found their voices. They started questioning the HOA's practices and their own roles in the neighborhood's power dynamic. The community began to unravel the web of control that had been spun by those in charge for years. As for Karen, she disappeared. No one knew where she went or what she was planning, but one thing was clear: she had gotten exactly what she wanted. By exposing Mr. Thompson, she had forced everyone's hand, making sure that her grip on the neighborhood was no longer the issue. Her departure felt like the calm after the storm, leaving everyone to deal with the damage. For me, the situation was still far from resolved, but in a strange way, I had gained something important: the truth. I had fought for my right to live peacefully, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me again. The experience had changed me. It made me realize that even when things seem impossible, standing up for yourself can shift the balance of power. And in the end, that's exactly what I did.